a coach, teacher, therapist, whatever your umbrella is, if you're looking after people, before you are the chiro or the physio or the myo or the personal trainer, you're an advocate for their health. That's your primary role. That's the foundation. Which means that any avenue open to you to advocate better for their health and to empower them further is your first priority. If your skill set contributes to that, that's fantastic. But if you know where your skill set is limited and you can then pass them on to someone who has a genius area in what they're missing, then you've just like double succeeded, because you've created an open network of care for that person. You've made health a collaborative community thing. You've recognized that entitlement has no place and it's about genuine care, and like everyone wins.
And your name now is on Instagram is ATTUNED.
Yeah.
Which is like, I think I'm going to call this podcast Getting Attuned with Jack. Where did that name come about?
That name probably came through other people using that word to talk about what they wanted to feel in their body in conversations.
Yeah.
I just want to get attuned to my body. I just want to figure out how this thing's working and pay more attention. At the time when I heard it a lot, I was calling my stuff stillness and strength, which had this sense of integration.
Yeah.
But still, it's like a dualistic name. Before that, I think I actually had my name on Insta, just Jack White. That was it. And then when, amongst trying to change my name, I lost some dude has it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that the name dropped in through conversation and it wasn't really something that I tried to put on my work. But it also took me quite a few years to feel like I had grown into the name, and I feel like I'm just beginning to now.
Yeah.
I was like, what does this really mean, and how can I embody it rather than just talking about things and then doing something different in my own life?
Yeah. It's like, I feel like it's a pretty big name to live up to. But I think you do a great job, man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So we were speaking earlier, and I kind of mentioned that I love an underdog story. And we were speaking a little bit about your journey. So is there much you can share with that in terms of what you sort of needed to overcome to get to where you are now? And was there any like modalities that helped you along the way?
Yeah. So if I think about first, what were the main things I had to overcome and how did they shape me? The biggest ones have been, it's always been a loss of identity, and that's been triggered by various things. So it could be triggered by injury. And for me, it was a back injury that was quite crippling physically and also in what it did to my self-confidence.
Were you diagnosed with anything?
Basically just herniations of discs, like L5, S1 and L4, L5 and some other stuff with that, like spinal stenosis was one of the things that came up, which is like inflammation of the kind of pocket that the spinal cord goes through. So all these things are quite scary, not just in the experience you have of them, but the labels and expectations that are attached when you go get a scan or you see a physio and you hear these things. But it's coming from statistical probabilities or from other people's lives. And what I always struggled with was the feeling that I shouldn't be so limited, or that diagnosis or prognosis of, you won't be able to lift, or you can't do this and you can't do that. I couldn't really make sense of how that applied to me, because I've been someone who'd always tried so hard to take care of my body, or at least develop it.
Yeah.
So that there were times when I was younger where I went too hard, and I guess I wasn't as good at listening to my body, or I didn't know what to listen for. But I still cared a lot, even though I didn't have all the tools.
Yeah.
My intention was there, I just didn't really know how to go about it. So it was confronting to go from someone so physical who'd built an identity around being strong. And there's layers as to why I built that identity too. But to go from that to feeling like I no longer had my outlet and my foundation with the back injury.
Yeah.
And also a big part of that we can talk about if you like is in the years before my dad passed away, and then not long after the back injury, I broke up with a girlfriend of mine who'd been a very good friend for years before that. So the emotional stuff all had to be worked through in order to heal the back, because it became one big like cross wiring of messy connections, you know?
I feel that, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. It's really awesome. I think like hearing that and getting to know a bit more about your story, I think I can like relate to certain aspects. Like you can't just address the physical symptoms that are coming up, and you can't fix it with just physical attention. Like there's more to it. Is there anything you could share on that?
Well, we experience life as whole individuals. Even when we feel fragmented by life, our experience isn't one that we can easily split into layers. We feel it all at once, and that's why it's sometimes so challenging and interesting to work through. So when you're trying to cultivate yourself through training or any discipline really, there's only so much you can split into layers, because ultimately it's going to be felt and integrated as one thing. So if you split things up into just physical or just mental, then you're only ever practicing one part of the picture, or one dimension or one layer. And it's things start to feel more and more difficult when you don't bring up the other layers, because it's like you're trying to draw up this mountain peak in one area of your life, but that peak's being dragged down by your lack of development in mind, emotion, spirit, relationships, finance, whatever it is. So
it's pretty huge. I think there's a lot of depth to it. I think like something that rings really true to me, and something that I've kind of opened myself up to, is like the metaphysical relationship we have to our body. So like a classic example, and it may or may not be applicable to you, but like back pain can be almost like symbolic of like a lack of foundation and support maybe in your life, and it's being kind of like communicated through the physical symptoms in your body. Is that something that you can like that you feel into as well?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And it shows up in language that we use all the time, like, I don't know, grow a spine, or like carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, or like finding your voice. All of these things we actually really already know deep down, and it's hinted at in language that these things are completely interrelated. And because of that, so it is related, of course, because everything is connected in a sense, but also because we speak about things in that way, our language shapes our expectations of our physical experience. So
I believe that wholeheartedly.
I got stabbed in the back, like, you know, it's being let down. It's literally being let down. It's like, and if we zoom in on the really materialistic level, then your sense of stability comes from like your belly or your trunk, like your core, your midline is the trunk of the tree. How are you going to feel emotionally stable? How are you going to feel stable on any of those more abstract layers if you're physically not stable? So stability is the thing. And then there's the physical layer with the actual spine. There's the mental layer with, you know, thought structures. And it's like every layer you want.
And words, like I like how you brought that into it. Like I think words play such a large role in our like physical reality. Like I've been surrounded by, like, with my background being scootering, like being like there's a lot of injuries that come with that, and a lot of extreme sports, but I was brought up around people saying like, oh, my knee's fucked, or like my back's fucked. And now I can see how much damage just those words do. because you're kind of like telling your body that it is fucked, and it's almost like keeping that physical symptom in a cycle. And that's been like a huge shift for me. It's kind of like realizing how powerful our words and our thoughts are when it comes to like what we want to change or what we want to like assist our bodies in doing or feeling. So
absolutely, man.
Yeah.
I'm like completely the same in that it's pretty common, especially for like young guys, to speak that way. Older guys, women, everyone, like we all like, but especially when you're young, fucked myself on that jump, or like whatever, like, and words, if you want to break it down, like the spelling of words, you can think of it like a spell. Words are spells. How literally you want to take that is up to you. You're at any moment, your psyche is weaving a story around what happens, and it's connecting that with the feeling in the body. So you play out your stories. It's self-fulfilling to some degree.
Yeah.
And if you're skeptical of that, then I think the ultimate answer to that skepticism is to just say, well, hey, yeah, like if I break my leg right now, it's not like there's not a serious problem. It's not like it's not kind of fucked in a way.
Yeah, you're not lying to yourself.
But if we stretch out the timeline and these causes and effects and the subtlety of language and thought starts to play out, then 5 years later, someone's thought process can mean they're still struggling with that broken leg, or it can mean that they let it go within a couple of months and then they're on to the next level of growth.
Yeah, totally, man. And that was my experience, is like people would have these injuries and like years later, they'd be like, oh, it was from that time I like really fucked my foot or something. And like, it's true, like on some level, but you're almost like perpetuating that your foot is broken, even though it might have recovered. And you're kind of like playing into the fact that it's not 100%. And I think that's where a lot of people and myself have been stuck with injuries before. So it's cool to have that understanding with someone else. And I very much do think that like words cast spells. Like I love that saying. Yeah, man. Because we're like, what the words we speak kind of program our subconscious, and then our mind is looking for everything to validate those thoughts or words. So like any inkling of pain or restriction of movement is like, if you're speaking in that way to yourself, you're going to be looking for it. And it's a huge one. Yeah, like I wish I found that out sooner, personally.
Yeah, it's powerful knowledge to have, and powerful. It's kind of powerful if you don't have it too, but you're on the wrong side of that power.
Yeah.
On the wrong side of yourself.
Yeah.
I totally feel what you're saying, man, about you hear that a lot when you work with people who are in pain. You say, okay, well, like, tell me about the pain, or tell me about what happened. And, same when you ask me, we attach these feelings to moments in time. And so it starts out with, 5 years ago, I fell off a ladder and broke my ankle. And there is always a story with the feeling, always.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just being aware of, like, if you're trying to heal something, being curious about what language comes up without you realizing when you talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And then at least if you're curious and you see the connection between language and experience, and that certain words make you look for or be open to certain experiences, then you can start to reshape the way you describe things.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I can really tell, I think, just because of your journey, that you've had to have an understanding of all of that. Like, you can't get to where you are now in a place of being able to teach, considering, what ultimatum you might have been given by doctors and stuff like that. Like, there's so much that goes into that kind of recovery, which is yeah, really cool to see. It's powerful because I think we were speaking about it earlier, but I think a lot of people can just be given a diagnosis or even a self-diagnosis of themselves, and that becomes their story, and that's it. And it doesn't need to be that way. I think it's what needs to be shared more than anything.
Yeah, you're always the way you meet an experience is always a reflection of whether you're signing on for more of that or not, whether it polarizes you when you say, oh, okay, yeah, that's me, or no, that's not me, or even when it doesn't polarize you and you meet the experience and you just sit with it for a bit without needing to decide whether that's you or that's not you. That's a huge power that I really want people to realize that they have. They've always got it. No one can take it from them. No one can give it to them. It's their own to use or not. And especially when you have like a diagnosis or a prognosis from someone with like a lot of clout, social status, and an institutional backing, there's that layer of, is what they say gospel, or is it just coming from the information they've been exposed to?
Yeah.
And if you take it as gospel, then you're signing on for the diagnosis and saying, right, okay, cool, I'll settle for that. I defer my relationship with my body to you. I'm going to outsource that relationship and I'm going to let you tell me who I am physically. So it's not about saying that like doctors or surgeons don't know anything, because of course they know a tremendous amount, but you're still having to meet that diagnosis, and that's still your choice, and you should be conscious of how you do that.
Well, yeah, and I think that's like where there's a bit of a grey area, because like a lot of experts in their field, like they are experts in what they know, but what they know is only what they've been taught. So I kind of look at health across like many platforms. Like I look at modern medicine, but I also look at like Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine and all of these different types of ways to look after the body. But I'm not just relying on one. Like I'm trying to get the whole spectrum, which I think's really important. Yeah, because it can be so, dogmatic in the way that some people speak their truth and in the field that they might be in, and you can almost put yourself in a box, sadly.
Yeah. It's a problem when incomplete truths are put forth as like the truth and the whole truth. And I think what happens is there's just a bit of complacency and a bit of entitlement in a sense, where because you've been validated by society for your particular mode of inquiry, maybe that's going to a prestigious university, you still only know what you know. But for some reason you have more confidence in what you know than someone who has gone a different route. Both of you only know half-truths. I only have a bunch of half-truths. You only have a bunch of half-truths. Like, we improve our half-truths. But when someone comes along and says, no, there's no room for that which is unknown, in my view, I know it, and that's how it is. Yeah. Then you're going to run into...
That's when I run.
Big troubles. Yeah, exactly. So, like, the mark for me of someone who is trustworthy is that they at least have some idea of where their limitations lie, because without that they can't transcend them, and they can't help you transcend yours. If they don't realize they're limited in their view, then there's nothing you can do to expand on that, or like reconcile subjective experience with statistical experience. There's no marriage to be had, and it sucks.
It's really interesting. I heard something recently which I loved, and it was this chiropractor like speaking about how he would refer a lot of his patients to like other chiropractors, and then all of the chiropractors that were being sent patients from him were just like, why are you sending me all these patients? And he's like, well, I can't help them. Like, I can only help the people that I can help. And so like that's why we need to work together. You know, if I don't have the answers, I need to pass them on to someone that might. And that was like so refreshing to hear. Like, I'm almost more trustworthy in someone like that kind of owns that. Yeah.
I honestly have come to that realization later than I would have liked, but it's such a powerful realization to have, that like as a coach, teacher, therapist, whatever your umbrella is, if you're looking after people, before you are the chiro or the physio or the myo or the personal trainer, you're an advocate for their health. That's your primary role. That's the foundation. Which means that any avenue open to you to advocate better for their health and to empower them further is your first priority. If your skill set contributes to that, that's fantastic. But if you know where your skill set is limited and you can then pass them on to someone who has a genius area in what they're missing, then you've just like double succeeded, because you've created an open network of care for that person. You've made health a collaborative community thing. You've recognized that entitlement has no place and it's about genuine care, and like everyone wins. Everyone wins. That person you've referred, they're going to be thrilled that you cared enough to like let them go explore that. The person you referred to is going to be like, oh wow, I can refer people back, and this person is like a giver, not a taker. It's about the people. It's not just about them.
That's a great distinction, actually. Yeah, look for people that are looking to give rather than to take from you. It's a great filter when it comes to health and well-being. Yeah, awesome, man. Yeah, I think I've just been able to see a lot of that in you without actually like talking a lot about it, which is like cool. Yeah. So I think we went on some cool tangents, which is cool. But coming back to my question, was there any like noticeable hurdles that you had to get over to get to the place that you're at now, where are you like feeling good in your body and you're feeling attuned, subtle?
Yeah. I kind of had to get over the idea that anyone had the answer. So that's one part of it, because I saw different practitioners and they all gave me a little bit of something. But when I took that as the answer, it sent me backwards. Whether, like, if I could have just accepted it as another piece of the puzzle, then it would have helped more. So that's me. I own that. Like, no one can do everything. Everyone helped me a little bit. Also, in the early stages when I was operating in the mind frame that, you know, you fix things when they're broken with a doctor or through surgery or by taking a pill, or like, that's all I knew, because I hadn't really been exposed to anything different when I was younger. Yeah. Getting over that hurdle and realizing that it wasn't a fix-all, that I still had to take on a lot of responsibility in myself to change my behavior. That was a big learning curve. Yeah. And then also just unpacking all of the emotional shit that I'd wound up with my back pain, and like letting go of a lot of, like, when you're in pain, you view the world differently, and so you approach relationships differently. Everything you do has this sense of caution and watch out, because pain's around the corner. And so then you have to break out of those relationships because they start to hold you in the pain state.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, I feel that, man. Yeah, it's so interesting. Like my journey that I can kind of relate to with that is, like, I had pretty bad eczema for like the worst that it was ever that it's ever been. I had it a little bit when I was younger, but maybe like 2.5 years ago, like it just really broke out. So I had to take this like whole holistic approach because I'd already ruled out, like the topical creams and the way that modern medicine kind of approached that. And that's how I kind of got deep into this, like, I guess, deeper understanding of how nutrition and our metaphysical and mind-body connection plays a role in the symptoms that I was having. And so much of that is like wired into our nervous system, and that's why I can relate, is because I had to like rewire my nervous system whilst also trying to tackle the physical symptoms, but they're like one and the same. And so that for me, it did look a lot like spending a lot less time with certain people. And it's not that they were the problem. It's more so like my body was still in that like field, and I had to remove myself to be able to like really hone in on my own nervous system and not kind of be I don't know the best way to describe it, because I don't like coming from like a victimized standpoint where other people are doing these things to me. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to our biology, our nervous systems are designed to co-regulate. So it's like if you sense danger, I'll sense danger. And that's just the way that we're wired. But if we're just perpetuating that, danger and that fear, we almost need to take a step away from it. Otherwise, that is what our co-regulation becomes. And it's kind of learning how to hold your own amongst everyone else's nervous systems at the same time, I feel. At least that was my journey. So, yeah. Can you relate to any part of that in your
all the
experience?
Time. Yeah. It's an ongoing thing that you can kind of practice all the time, right? Like, how do I fit into this? Am I buying into this? Am I part of this? Am I not part of this? Is this my vibe? Is it not? And yeah, when we're surrounded with stress, we just tend to take it on. We want to naturally kind of fit in and go with the flow of what our environment is. It's like when in Rome,
Yeah.
So there's that element of selecting and cultivating or curating your environment and your relationships. And I think especially earlier in a journey of recovery from some kind of illness or like mental or physical pattern that you want to break, it's quite important, that environment, because it becomes your feedback loop. You kind of outsource a bit of the effort because you don't have enough energy to do it all yourself. You outsource a bit to the environment or the community. If you're in a good community, then it kind of holds you in your preferred habits that you want to move towards.
Yeah.
And the preferred outlooks and the daily practices. Do we prioritize health or don't we? And then going beyond that, once you start to realize that actually all that's done is given you back your power, then you can go out and kind of put yourself in the middle of like a deliberately stressful situation and kind of flex it and play with it. And then you go looking for like controlled stresses, like I'm going to do an ice bath, or I'm going to go and take on this challenge of Christmas with the family.
Yeah, totally. I've had fun exploring those controlled stresses myself. I think like where it's dangerous is when it's like not conscious. Like when you have these stresses that you're not really conscious of, or you're not really like really sitting with and asking yourself whether it's serving you or not. And so that was like a big turning point for me, is realizing like the stresses aren't bad. It's more so being conscious of like what stresses can you choose to take on, because we're always going to be having stresses. But to be able to handle them all, we kind of need to come from this like baseline approach of like, I guess like being conscious of like what inflammation we're causing in our body more than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got like everything's pulling you towards a particular kind of adaptation,
Yeah.
stressing you in one way or another, inflaming you in the short term to respond. And how you respond depends on your intent, the stresses, how ready you are, what you're trying to do. So, stress isn't stress. Like, not all stress is equal. Your beliefs about what's going to happen have an effect too. Like, it's that whole thing of the poison is in the dose, where like we could get two people and give them the same kind of training program, and it's going to break one of them, and it's going to like leave the other one to the next Olympics. It's how you're meeting it. It's always the relationship between self and world, or like body and environment, and between nervous systems.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's cool. Epic. Well, this is my first podcast without a power supply, so we're running off battery. I'm going to just briefly check where we're at, and then we'll...
Good move.
In case I need to, like, close it off. We've got no limitations. Cool. With your practice, what's your mission and your goal with that? And what place does it come from? I think it would have a lot to do with your story in getting to where you are, I'm sure.
Yeah, my story has helped me to kind of twig on to a couple things, but those things are universal. So like, fuck it, let's plunge all the way in, all the way deep, right?
Yeah.
I struggled for a long time with the existential thing, just mortality, right? Like, there's so much to do in the world. There are so many ways we can live, but behind that, there's this sense of like, why though? Because like, it'd be cool if I knew before I die, like why, what this thing is and why we're here, and like, why would a conscious being be trapped in a body that is finite? Why would you put this incredible universal awareness into something that's, in a sense, doomed to just perish? So we go deep, right?
Yeah.
But like, this is the stuff that would keep me staring at my bedroom wall at night, like freaking out.
Yeah.
And these are the questions that I wanted to answer, because like, when someone you love dies, or like, what is this? How can things change so rapidly and hugely, but also it's kind of so light, like nothing really matters. Like, somehow life just goes on the next day or the next moment, even though everything you thought was real isn't. So that's in the background. And then, we're going to the gym, obviously, or we're eating good food, or we're exercising for health because we want to stay around longer. We want to have better experiences. Maybe we don't have to figure out life. Maybe the point is to just enjoy what's here, and that's great. But there's this like sense in me that the older I get, and the older everyone gets, the more it becomes important for them to find something that they love, which transcends that ephemeral experience that just comes and goes. If we get too attached to our muscles that we love when we're young, then what happens when we lose them and we're 80? Like, if your identity is fixed in one chapter of life and you move on to the next, you're going to be dragged by the time and by change. Or you can go with it and be ready for the next chapter, whatever that entails.
Yeah.
Now, the ultimate journey here is like coming into yourself, becoming your own energetic powerhouse to heal, to create, to manifest into the world, whatever it is that you're called to manifest. And as you get older, that becomes more of a thing of, well, how am I going to meet the end of my life? Like, what's it going to mean for me? And how can I find beauty in that? Even if you're young, even if it seems so far away, you don't know. It might not be. And it would serve you to not have that monkey hanging off your back of, you're fucked. you're going to die, none of this matters. So if you can kind of figure it out sooner, at least a little bit, or be curious, then maybe you won't live in fear. Because I think that fear of death and the fear of loss of identity permeates every little decision.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be ruled by that. We want to be ruled by something that's much more in a place of love.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm trying to come through this work. And that's like my whole purpose.
Yeah, I really love that. It's been a big theme for me, like impermanence, and like a lot of friends. We've kind of like touched on this subject. And I think why it's so interesting is because I think it can like really make or break you. You can really just like fall into the depths of like that you are going to die. And that can bring so much pain and discomfort, or it can be extremely liberating. And I think it's just like such a funny contrast of something that we have to deal with as like a human being. Is there's certain things we need to accept, and they're also there for us to be liberated from, and to like give meaning to why we are here. Because if we just live forever, like what would this be? And why would we want to have this conversation and like try and bring in new ideas and new ways of thinking to our own lives if we just live forever? Because we would just eventually, there'd be no drive.
That's an interesting thought too. Hey.
Yeah.
Is it the impermanence that drives us to live and to do things? And it's all stories, really, isn't it? It's like, I don't have much time, so I should make this time count. That's like a logical process that we're going through, or a felt process, that sense of urgency and importance in the moment. But now I'm even beginning to question whether you need to be like a mortal being to have that urgency. Maybe you do. Who knows? Maybe like supply and demand of time.
It's a funny one, isn't it? I was actually speaking about it last night, and what I said was that like the human experience is, a lot of it is holding like polarity, but we're trying to live in, and this is just more so for me and how I'm choosing to live and my beliefs, but because I hold impermanence so close and it gives a lot of meaning in my life, I'm like, I need to make the most of what I'm doing. But simultaneously, I'm also holding the fact that good things take time. And like, you can't rush and be impatient with results that you're looking to achieve, where you can make the most out of your experience. Like, you can get caught on either end of the spectrum, I think. So like, the question I asked myself, I guess, was like, how do we hold the idea that we should be making the most out of our experience, but also being patient with our own evolution? Because we can, with those two extremes, we can almost like not be living, in a sense.
Yeah, you can be afraid. You can be afraid to change and do things because they seem so difficult or overwhelming, and at the same time be afraid of not doing them because that's difficult and overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, man. What do you think it is? Like, what is the approach that helps us meet the middle?
It's been a big one for me. I think like I've had to really challenge like both extremes, and I've really given a lot of my life to taking away a lot of responsibility and a lot of stress so I can just enjoy the time that I have. And in doing that, I found that that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, I think there's more to this experience than just being and just enjoying the more simple things in life. Although, you know, that's an important part of what I hold close to me. Like, you can't, I think what I've learned is you can't move forward without an appreciation of those smaller things and like gratitude. But in kind of just sitting in that and not really following much action, like, I've realized that there is a lot of pleasure and reward and excitement that comes with like achieving or learning or like following a certain level of excitement to actually feel like I'm making the most out of my experience. So it's kind of like, I guess where I've got to is like, I need to be moving in this forward direction, which is how nature and evolution works. Like, I can't fight that, but I can't get too caught up in that so that I don't forget how finite our experience is. And so, like, can I remain grateful and still and enjoy the small things whilst also moving in an upwards trajectory?
Totally. Yeah,
and I think that'll be a lifetime. Yeah, I think that's going to be a lifelong practice to kind of balance the two polarities, I guess.
Yeah, it's like moving towards effortless action. It's kind of what I take from it, you know? You want to keep that sense of not fighting the flow or being still within what's here because it's here and because it doesn't have to be, but it is, and what a miracle. And also, everything's moving, so taking action is kind of sometimes the way to find the stillness. Otherwise, you stop and everything rushes past you, and that's not... Is that stillness? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
If you think of like a really beautiful dance between two things that are moving, they just synchronize, and yeah, they're both moving, but they're like really gentle in their contact with one another. And if that's like us versus the movements of the planet or whatever, then it's kind of maybe the same.
Yeah, I like that.
It's kind of like curiosity, I think, is what has felt like my middle path, because if I can have a light relationship with the unknown and I'm drawn towards what I don't know, then I don't have to fear it, and it can become part of me, and then I can change.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's a great thing to talk about, I think, especially given that this is kind of like a lot of the reason why you're doing what you're doing, I suppose, is it's coming from this place of a level of impermanence, but not maybe not taking things so seriously that we suffer at the same time. Is there or I guess maybe I can like rephrase it. So with the practice that you're offering at the moment, and a lot of the reasoning behind that, do you think it's come from this place that we're kind of speaking about, which is like, you can't really be left dormant to do nothing, so this is your thing? Yeah.
You can't transcend your problems, you can't transcend your body, you can't transcend the experience you're in. You're meant to be here. What you're facing is not an accident. It's for you to work with and create something from, and the way you address that teaches everything else how to address its own suffering. So the body is the gateway in, because like, you have to deal with practicality. You've got to, if we say a fuck knee, whatever it is, the story you're telling, you have to deal with it. It's not just a story, it's an embodied experience. But through coming to terms with what's real and immediate and embodied and physical, you then have a direct path into what's real and immediate. And what's funny is that the more you embrace the physical and get to know it, the more it starts to pull you into things that aren't physical. Like, there's no contradiction there. There's like, physical is metaphysical, physical is spiritual, physical is emotional. Like, there's no boundary.
Yeah.
But you have to start from the foundation, otherwise you're trying to like jump up to the sky and grasp the divine in all things. Meanwhile, like, the kitchen's on fire. Like, you'll never get there like that. Like,
Yeah. That's a great example. It's like, I love that, and I think there's like a lot of like core principles and like laws of nature that you've kind of like taken on and that I can kind of see and I've like come to understand. But for someone that kind of doesn't really have that, doesn't have like a tool set or a set of beliefs to kind of guide them in that direction, is there a place you think to start?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Posture, breathing, and walking. They're the ones that I'm obsessed with at the moment.
Yeah.
It's really
So simple, right?
really elementary, but those things contain everything. So posture, knowing your skeleton, knowing your deep structures, and being able to align them efficiently for everything you're doing in life, whether it's picking something up or standing or sitting. Knowing how to hold stillness and also knowing how to release and flow and be malleable and adaptive with your posture, depending on the task at hand. And so that's kind of how you should be training, both with an understanding of positions and the connections between positions. And then breathing is something we all do. Walking is something we all do, and dive into those too.
Yeah, it's... Well, let's dive into breath, because I think that's been the biggest one for me. It was probably like 4 or 5 years ago. Like, my partner at the time was a yoga teacher, and so she was speaking about the breath, and she introduced to me the idea of nose breathing to me. And at that point, I'd never thought about that there's more than one way to breathe. Like, you just do it. It's one of those things that are autonomic. Is that the word? Like, something you don't have to like think about, but you just do. And it was like such a big shift for me, because when I started to breathe through my nose and be more conscious of that, I found the situations that I was going into now with a different, or a conscious awareness of how I'm breathing, actually means I'm showing up differently in these different situations that I was completely unconsciously before. And it almost brought this like sense of power to be able to like regulate myself in different environments, which I feel like is monumental in what we're speaking about, which is like a metaphysical relationship between our body and our minds and something greater. Like, if we can realize we have the power within our bodies to shape how we show up in the world, that quite literally changes how we view our reality, which I think is, something that we don't really speak about enough, unless you're kind of in, the world of yoga or breath work and stuff like that. But it is so simple, and so I think the best things in life are simple.
Yeah, it's like the best things should be things that everyone can access.
Yeah.
Like, firsthand.
Yeah. And so what was like, how did you come to those realizations when it comes to like posture and breath? And
Suffering and pain was my catalyst. It kind of made me pay attention.
Yeah.
So both in terms of physical through the spinal injury with back pain, I just had to be more aware of how I was standing, and I was made aware because suddenly I couldn't stand the way I normally would, and the normal comfort of my posture wasn't available to me. So I had to dig into that to get it back, or get a new version, whatever it is. And then also with meditation, that became a feature in my life, something that I practiced because like there was a whole emotional layer of anguish from breakup and just this constant feeling of like heartbreak. So that's a bit postural, I guess. Both on the physical in terms of how you're holding your seat if you're sitting or walking, and metaphysical in terms of your posture towards the thoughts coming at you or through you.
Yeah.
How do you meet them? That's a postural thing in a metaphysical sense. So that pain put me onto it. So pain was my friend. Like I didn't realize it at the time, but it was saying, "Hey man, here's the good stuff. Go check this out." Sounds crazy to say.
Love it, man. I used to be one that would run from pain and anything that was hard. Like I was so hyper focused on avoidance that now I've done like a complete 180 and I like seek it out in a sense, and I've really come to realize that it is and can be like a catalyst. It's almost there for us if we can choose to see it in that way. It's following that, the idea that we're always growing and we're always evolving, whether we like it or not. Like something has to shape us, and I don't think it's happiness. Like we're not going to just evolve through our love for every aspect of our lives day in, day out. Like there's a certain level of growth that can happen, but it's not gonna shape you in the ways that pain can. And always like the analogy of like diamonds are formed under pressure. You know, something so beautiful and so structured doesn't happen just overnight.
Yeah,
I think that's a good realization. I'm glad I've come to, is to kind of seek out those controlled stresses and pain rather than waiting for them to come.
Yeah,
because they do come.
There has to be structure too, right? I love that you mentioned that and used the diamond analogy. Like you have to find structures which can carry you through chaos. Chaos is the unknown, I guess, or the unpredictable. And the right structures are really beautiful and really adaptable. So a chaotic world means that a body should be built to have these structures or these movement patterns that can deal with whatever comes at you. And not just movement patterns, but the physical structure, like made up of tissues, made up of muscle, made up of all of the layers. And then you have like thought structures to lean on when things don't make sense or things to revisit. There's got to be some level of structure always for flow as well. I think that's been a big learning for me over the last like 18 months, that like my flow and my contentment is also proportionate to how beautiful my structures are. They can't be completely top down of, oh, you just have to do it this way, this is the perfect morning routine, and if you don't meditate things are going to fall apart. It's more like letting the structures emerge from listening to your body, observing how you're thinking, and just letting things kind of guide you.
I feel that. I'm glad you brought that up. I think a lot of like my inspiration to start moving my body more was like from the likes of like David Goggins and like just really extreme cases, which were like very structured and disciplined, which I think has its value, but I think it kind of negates the fact that we can listen to our body, and our body, I like to believe our body has an intelligence beyond our mind. So our body, it's like challenging the layers of, pain and stresses and controlled stresses, like doing something you might not want to do whilst trying to simultaneously listen to your body and what it is going to thrive on or what it's not. And I think like trying to stick to like a super regimented workout routine for me just hasn't worked. Like it needs to be incorporated into my week, but I've kind of like struggled to go against my what my body is telling me. And yeah. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's not for everyone at every stage, the Goggins style of approach. When you were saying that, I was thinking, well, it kind of depends who you are, right? I think he's kind of living in this place of like, I am awareness in a body and I can shape this body in this world to become whatever the fuck I want it to be. And he's like fully in his power. There may also be a sense, and it's hard to say because I don't know the guy at all. That might be it. He might have it. There may also be a sense that like that structure keeps him feeling really safe, and like if he didn't have it, he'd be a bit more like he'd be struggling a bit.
Yeah.
But if we all have to have a structure, and if his is creating something beautiful, and at least showing people what humans can do at the outlier level of experience, then that's his purpose in the world. And someone else is probably going to have a different purpose or a different way of coming at that.
Yeah.
Hey, here's your power thing. So I love the dude, but I don't train like him, and I don't suggest that people do. Equally, I know a couple of people who kind of do, and I'm like, all power to you. Like,
yeah, it has its place, like for sure. It's like without people in those shoes, like I wouldn't have found the inspiration, So it's like, I think you need those extreme cases, but you also, I think I've had to remind myself I don't need to become that. Like I can take inspiration, but I don't need to become that.
You want to make your own version of something that's like the full actualization of Kevin. Like David, cool. Jack, cool. That's like some of the biggest issues for me have come from trying to like match an aspirational vision that someone else had put out there and trying to be too much like them instead of just being the best me.
Easy to get caught up in that. Hey,
so easy because it's all those aspirational images are readily available now, and they're incredible, but they're celebrated in a snapshot of time, which is when they've already kind of become something. And a lot of the people watching those things don't feel like they've yet become their version of that thing. And so it's like you kind of need to follow yourself for a while, even if you seem to be going in the wrong direction, because who's to say that you won't stumble upon something that no one else has, and then everyone will be like flocking to you for like, oh, thank you for trusting yourself, man, and doing this, and rather than just trying to be another replica of like,
that's a good distinction to make. I think because I think like I was talking like I've had some great conversations recently, but I was talking about the idea of, whether we like it or not, our worth is kind of based on how useful we are. And how useful we are is almost directly linked to how in tune we are with ourselves. Because if we're like following someone else's, path in literature or education, like we're not actually, like we're just replicating someone else's work, which is great, and there's a lot of value in that. But I think the most value we have to offer is our own, whether we've found it or not. And that's something that I've like come to realize more and more recently. It's like I want to tap into that for myself rather than be repeating other people's things that have helped me. Yeah.
It's almost like everyone's birthright and everyone's duty just to become the ultimate, like, within themselves, not by someone else's standards, but within themselves, to be fulfilled and to be useful, because like that's that one particular crystallization or gem or like diamond that's going to come out from that consciousness. No one's going to be able to do you as well as you can. And then you don't have to worry about competition either, or comparison, because no one can copy you. Like you're literally one of a kind.
You don't have to worry about that.
The irony, right, is like that being yourself actually takes sometimes many years or a lifetime. Like it's no small thing. It's so easy
journey
to try and, you know, walk in other people's shadows. So be yourself is special. Like if you manage to do that and live in the world and contribute something, holy shit, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what you're doing, man. You're definitely on your way. Yeah.
Thanks, dude. Yeah. Likewise. Yeah, it's a beautiful blend of experiences that are coming together through you, and like also just the pace at which you're exploring and expressing is really, like, whenever I chat to you, it's a really nice pace to sit in. The way you speak and the way you think.
I appreciate that, man. It's been a funny one for me, because like until I actually sat with myself, I didn't really realize what my own energy was. We've got a little friend. Hello. First appearance on the podcast.
Hey, how you doing?
Before I sat with myself, I didn't really know what my energy was and where I felt most safe. And in kind of the more that I sit with myself, I've realized that there is this space and pace that feels most natural to me. And so I've like really been trying to challenge how I can maintain that in different environments, because everyone is so different. But like, how can I hold true to myself in that way? Because it does feel like a lot of people get impatient with me because I'm like just taking my time. And it's just funny to me now. Like I understand it from many angles, but I appreciate you picking up on that.
Yeah, man, I dig it.
Yeah,
it's really good. It's a perfect Sunday pace, especially for a potty.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Is there anything else you wanted to share while we're on?
Only one thing, which is kind of like a bit of a, hopefully, words of encouragement. It's like, and also that takes some of the pressure off getting things right. When you're trying to get things right or optimize your process or like find perfect, you're never meant to, and things are still meant to go wrong.
Yeah.
So have you heard of the idea of anti-fragile? Just the concept of anti-fragile?
No, maybe you can expand on that.
Well, it's kind of like coined by Nassim Taleb. And there's two ways of thinking about things, really. We can try to optimize our lives and ourselves just to get everything just right. Or we can become anti-fragile, which is just like being ready for shit to hit the fan and to still be okay.
Yeah.
And if you go too far down the optimal route and you're always trying to have the perfect routine or keep your body totally pain-free all the time, not change things up when they feel like they've hit that nice sweet spot and you want to keep them just there, you're sometimes quite like fragile at that point. You're quite susceptible to spanners being thrown.
Yeah.
And that's what life does, and it's how it keeps you playful. It's how it keeps you adaptive and curious and on your toes. You know, you might suddenly have to shift identities. So if you frame things about being anti-fragile and kind of just looking out for the major threats or the major pitfalls, which is like not being true to yourself, because then you'll never, other than going off course to come back, not being true to yourself doesn't really help. If you become someone who's super reliant on other people's viewpoints or like dogma, if that falls apart, you've kind of got no system, you've got nothing left. So
yeah, totally.
The beauty of a human being and the empowering thing for healing and the thing that makes things fun is being adaptive, being able to get things wrong, fall over, but turn that into your strength.
Yeah, you can like almost build, I really love that concept, like anti-fragile. And what I take from it is like you can really build a confidence in failure or doing, you know, things maybe not so perfectly. It's like, can I show up no matter what is thrown at me? And that's like, the more you do that, the more you're kind of like building resilience and confidence in yourself
100%.
with whatever life does throw at you, because it's always gonna it's gonna keep coming.
Yeah, and even resilience is fantastic, but like even building on that is like, how can you draw enthusiasm from things going wrong? Like you said, you know, you started to almost seek out these borderline painful experiences or these challenges, and you made that like part of your life. That's the epitome of anti-fragile. You get to a state where you're seeking out imperfection to create something more perfect, and you're transmuting your own suffering into like this beautiful version of reality. So that doesn't happen when you obsess over perfect, though. Like, you've got to go have your own journey. So that's my one message, like trust your journey and trust the mistakes, and like don't run from them, but ask for more and ask to be more adaptable.
Yeah, that's a beautiful message, man. And it's something I need to definitely still practice. I've always been like a perfectionist with everything I do up until probably the last 6 to 12 months. So it's nice to kind of be a beginner and like play into that realm. And I like how you put it, anti-fragile. It's a good, I think it encompasses it quite well. Awesome, man. Well, it's been fun. It's been a great convo as usual. How can, for those that might be listening, how can they reach you? Are you best found on Instagram?
Yeah, that's probably where I'm most consistently showing up. So that's _attuned. Also my website, attuned.space. And you can email me, hello@attuned.space. Yeah, the coaching, there's some free programs up there.
Yeah, you just released like an online container, which looks really cool.
Yeah, there's a PDF called Gateway, which is all about transforming the body from a cage, something that feels restricting, you've got pain, stress, you're not managing it very well, to the gateway, which is like having the supple strength or the foundations to go places in life, and also a gateway to knowing yourself better and figuring out this whole thing, if that's your flavor.
Yeah, cool, man. I'll get you to send me that through Messenger or something, and I'll add it in the show notes when I upload it. But sounds good. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me, bro.
Yeah,
Pleasure
it's been
to
awesome.
chat.
Cool.